It's great to be able to introduce you to Karen Marrolli tonight. So, and now that I know it's being recorded, I am definitely changing my questions that I'm asking. So, no, I'm not going to do that. So, Karen is just a wonderful, wonderful composer in our catalog who probably, when was your first publication with us? Maybe 6 years ago or 5 years ago?
It may be, I think it's a little longer than that. It may be closer to 10. Yeah.
Okay. Well, it's just one of those really great things that happened that Karen started sending her pieces in, and just they were wonderful. And we immediately found that they were a fit for us and for our company, and then just a wonderful chance to work with her. So a little bit about her. She went to Westminster Choir College, and then she also has a doctorate in choral conducting from Louisiana State University. I don't think Alton's on here. I was looking to see if he was going to shout or anything. But so she graduated and then has been involved in church work and in community choir work ever since, and now lives in Albuquerque and is in a Methodist church in Albuquerque. And she just is a wonderful person on top of all of that stuff. So we're really, really glad to get to introduce you to our choir and my friends. And Kyle's going to ask the first questions. So I'll let Kyle go back to Kyle.
Thank you. Karen, before we dive further into the interview with you, just share with us how things are going in Albuquerque and at your church. How things are.
Well, everything is sort of crazy right now for all the reasons that you might expect. But the church that I'm in, under normal circumstances, would have a pretty healthy chancel choir, adult chancel choir. We have a really wonderful bell program, a symphonia. That we get together periodically, mostly for Easter, but it's sort of volunteers from the congregation that can play woodwinds and brass and all of those sorts of wonderful things. And then I also will do things with children's music for their children's time on the Sunday. So, I mean, and I started running a concert series there called a Love Your Neighbor concert series. And I really wanted it to be a little bit lighter than some of the area places have their Bach Sundays and all that kind of stuff, which is great. I love that. That's what I was trying to do. But I was bringing in a lot of like jazz and singer-songwriters and folk folks, and people were giving donations to different organizations that helped with homelessness or helped people that were being sheltered from abuse and all of that kind of stuff. So all that to say, normally very active in a way that you would sort of expect, and now very active in ways that we never expected, 6 or 7 months ago that we would ever be. So, right now things are, New Mexico itself and Albuquerque have been very lucky up to this point. As far as virus activity, we're having some spikes now, so I'm not sure if that luck is running out and how that will impact what we're doing at the church. But right now we are actually in a situation where we're starting to go to 3 services with people inside only in one of them. So I don't know how you all are handling. I've seen some videos coming up on Facebook, and it looks like you're doing the live stream maybe with the empty church. And so what we're doing right now is we have our early parking lot service where I strap on my guitar and people can stay in their cars and pipe it in on the radio. It's on a radio station. Or the weather is really nice here for a long time in the fall, so they've been taking their lawn chairs out and sitting out. Everybody wears their masks. They sit outside. They can sing a little bit, that kind of stuff. And then we're going to, we've always done a live stream at our 10 o'clock service. Mm-hmm. And this may not be of interest to you at all, but it's interesting to me. I realized right away, we started to do in-person stuff in mid-September and put them in the 10 o'clock service. But as a lot of you probably know, the impacts of having people in the room on music are sort of detrimental to live streaming. As we all know, live stream right now is probably our main, that's your biggest service, that's your main service. So I said, I think we need to get these people out of the sanctuary and go back to having more music and hymns at the 10 o'clock, and then let them come in at the 11 o'clock and do a morning prayer type service. So so we're actually moving to doing three services and doing pretty well with everything. So, I mean, hopefully that'll continue, but yeah.
Great.
But that's where we are right now.
Yeah. Great. Glad to hear no cases there in the church or anything. It seems like it's been a very good.
Ding. Somebody's done.
Yeah, that's
It's a chat. One of the things that we are doing is we were chatting just a little bit before we before you all came in from the waiting room, is we have like a little small group that we're doing only outside singing. There's like 8 of them. They have to wear masks, and I have them all spaced like 10-12 feet away from each other outside, and so we're doing a little bit of singing that way, and just kind of seeing how it goes. But it's interesting to see what's going on in the various schools and churches, I think, right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely a lot of different models.
Yeah,
used right now. Yeah, thank you, Karen. Well, tell us about your early years, how your musical journey began, and especially how it led you to composing.
Mm-hmm. So, you know, my early is probably counter to what a lot of people might suspect. Like I wasn't growing up with the piano lessons and learning to do music correctly and all of that kind of stuff. When I was a little kid, there wasn't really, I was singing a lot. And I used to wander around and sing George Jones songs and apparently tell people that I wrote them when I was 5. And the songs weren't necessarily appropriate for a 5-year-old. But people would look at my mother and shake their head. You know, it's George Jones. You can't go wrong with that, country music. So, I mean, I grew up on a lot of that kind of, you know, a weird mix of like old country music and the Beatles. There wasn't a lot of just tutelage or anything like that in music in my house. So I just sort of started teaching myself on my own to play the piano. I was playing the piano by ear by the time I was like 9 or 10. I wrote my first song when I was, I think, about 12, because I used to like to write poetry when I was younger, and I set one of my first poems just from learning to fiddle around on the piano, you know, by myself. And a lot of my early, you know, high school, middle school, high school type composing actually comes from songwriting. And some people may know that I do a lot of on the side singer-songwriter type things. You know, some people have said, oh, he's like Joni Mitchell or Joan Baez. So you all will understand what that means. Not everybody always does, but so I have that kind of a, I guess, growth experience and sensibility, which I think plays into what I do now and the way I construct things now. And then when I was in high school, my last year of high school, I saw in my chorus class the movie Amadeus. And I said, oh, well, maybe I could write some classical music. Maybe this classical thing is not so bad. He's wearing a pink wig and, you know, it all could be okay. So I started writing and actually writing them down and trying to write, you know, and of course it was in that semi-classical style because that was the music that I was getting, you know, in my ear at that time. And so that's how I got into that and started writing, you know, when I was in college. Got into Westminster, and I actually went into Westminster as a Bachelor of Music major because that is what my mother was comfortable with. Because if I got, a Bachelor of Arts in Music. Let me say that correctly. Because if you get a Bachelor of Arts, you can do anything, kids, right? Doesn't matter if you're trying to study something that's just like crazy. So I started in that vein, and then switched in my second year to a Bachelor of Music and Composition, and never did I make anyone more angry ever. But so that's how I sort of started to get into it. So it wasn't like your typical, this is being nurtured and this is what came out. It was just sort of like it happened anyway, just because that's just who I was. I sang a lot. I sang in choirs, middle school, high school, and did all that kind of stuff. But I did not start learning piano properly until I was in high school. And by then, I was at least a sophomore or junior in high school. It was too late. It was just too late for me at that point. But so that's how some of that stuff kind of came to be.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. So far, we've got three of your pieces in the library that at least I'm aware of at this point, having just been here for 18 months and feel like the last 7 don't count.
They super count.
Well, they do count.
School now.
Director. I feel like I'm going to have to go back to school to learn how to direct a choir.
It comes back to you, apparently. This last 7 months is like, separating the sheep from the goats.
So we've sung, actually, you might find this, well, I know you'll find this interesting, that actually the last piece we sang together as a choir was one of yours. I Sought the Lord, in the early days of Advent on March 8th. And so that was the last thing we've sung, Karen, was that piece. And we've been working on your other settings of Come Before the Table and Like a Mighty Wind in our virtual rehearsals lately. And separately as singers, I think they all should have been practicing individually. I'm looking at all of them. And so we are preparing them when we can sing together, of course, and can celebrate communion, of course, like with Come Before the Table. Is there a background that you'd like to share about any one of these in particular, one that's most meaningful, or two, if you couldn't decide which of the 3, you wanted to share about?
Well, I can't say that overall, and probably we're going to touch on this again later. I don't know how I know that. But generally, I tend to write for like a need. So, if I think there's a need for a particular day or a particular, so all of them have that in common. This, idea of writing for World Communion Sunday, which can be a very particular day, writing for Pentecost, Like a Mighty Wind. I'd been asked by somebody, do you have a Pentecost piece? And I said, no, I really don't. So I guess that's something I should get on, I Sought the Lord was because that text was really good for a particular Sunday. And I needed a piece that I could teach very quickly, that my choir could just pick up and read and do it in like a week or two. And it just sort of, I knew the text very well especially from working in the Episcopal Church for a long time. And I knew that text would be a great fit for this particular Sunday. And then the thing that nobody wants to hear, you don't want to hear it. I just basically heard it with the text, heard the melody. And I think I wrote that piece. I guess I'm talking about this a little bit because you all sang it last. I wrote it on a Monday. I cleaned up the score on a Tuesday, and they read it on a Wednesday. And then we never got to do it because it was right at the end of the choir season, and the Sundays that they were going to preach on particular things flipped, and that Sunday flipped to a time that was after choir was over.
Mm-hmm.
So that was very sad. And then we were going to work on that again. And I think we read it once right before we got taken out for COVID. And I don't want to encourage bad behavior in your choir, but I'll just have you know that some of my altos changed that text to I sought the Lord and the Lord won. There was all kinds of just chittering and bad behavior and whatever in my choir, sitting up in front waiting for, of all services, the Ash Wednesday service. And it was because, and I was, what are you doing? It's like I'm teaching high school again. And it's because the altos had gotten that piece in their packets and they're changing it to I saw the Lord and the Lord one. So, that can happen. But yeah, and whatchamacallit, Come Before the Table, I will just say, was a weird piece. It was sort of an experiment piece because I love world music. And, I just wanted to see if I could, because that's such a sort of a departure, if I could write something that felt kind of like that and use the drum. And, so I hope that it's sort of a kind of a different take on music that you might hear coming from, Africa or from indigenous cultures, but sort of a nod to that, but with like a different kind of a feel, I guess. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's sent to me that apparently one of our altos did change the words to it too.
It's altos. I'm an alto. Why are we so bad?
I know.
I ask Jenny about that most of the time, actually. So I just had a choir member text me to ask, what was your best-selling piece with Morning Star? That's a good question. I think maybe Let Us Come.
That's quite likely.
So, and actually we've done that one, Kyle. But we did it during the interim. I did a lot of Marrolli during the interim. Yeah. I think that was one. So one of the things that you do that is a very, I guess not completely unusual, but I would say it's rare, is that you write your own texts. Mm-hmm. And often whenever we receive things from composers who write their own text, they're not really full text. They're like little micro things, Randall Thompson wrote his own text for Alleluia, of course. But, how did you come to writing your own texts, and how do you go about that? What comes first? Text, music? Talk about that.
So I think that the writing of the own text goes back to starting out with songwriting. Kinds of things. And the journey is sort of weird because when I was in high school, I was writing songs. But then once I switched gears to college, I wasn't writing that, song verse chorus, type material anymore. And did not get back into it, quite honestly, until I moved to Santa Fe, where if you're going to do something weird, that's where you're going to do it, I guess. So I actually started writing, getting back into, which involves writing your own words, your own music, your own everything, if you're doing everything. And I guess through that, I kind of got the confidence from writing some of my own things and performing them and having people actually like them, to say, well, let me see if I can write my own text. And the first one that I tried my hand at was "Oh Dayspring." And it was just a very sort of concise, text. But so that's where that kind of came from, was the fact that I was writing and recording this whole different genre of music. And then that kind of gave me the confidence to try to do some real music, I guess, or, put my text to, it's sort of a daunting thing, a lot of the you see texts get set that are like, Sure on the Shining Night. And,
right.
How is my text gonna, why should I, I should sit down, but I did not. And, this is sort of what happened. But as far as.
And I think you have a very good theological understanding because
that's
of your.
Always very scary too.
Yes.
I was like, let me not say anything that I don't know what I'm talking about.
We'll check. We'll check. Yeah.
That's good.
Go ahead.
But, as far as, what comes first, or does the music come out of the text, or does the text come out of the music? The simple answer is it depends. So sometimes I write a text first, and then I either hear the melody that should go with it, or I kind of find it because I'm hunting around on the piano. Sometimes I hear a melody or feel like a rhythm, something like that, and then I write the text to fit in with that. And the example that I think of actually right off the bat, which is not one of the churchy pieces, but is Undivided, because that's one where I actually felt this sort of folky, like, oh, if I were going to write something that felt kind of like the Waylon Jennings or something like that, what would it feel like? And then I wrote the text to fit the music. Whereas Walk in Light, I had a piece of text, We Will Study War No More. And I was standing in my kitchen and I just heard the rest of the melody. And then I filled in text to fill in the rest of the melody. So it's sort of a complex, you never know kind of which way there are multiple ways of entry.
Yeah, well, you actually do that quite a bit. You do it with melody as well. You often incorporate a familiar melody at some point in your work. And people kind of go, okay, this has got old and new that emerge in some kind of way. So I think that's part of what you're talking about too, isn't it?
That as well too. And that's sort of a Baroque thing, isn't it? I mean, didn't they do that in that period to kind of
sure?
If you
I'm
take
not that old.
tune,
Yes.
yeah, if you take a tune that the congregation would know, it deepens the entry, I guess, into the piece.
Right.
It deepens the understanding, gives another level of understanding. So there's that too as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like to use that quite a bit.
So the other thing that you do a lot in your writing is you hearken to either folk music, or it seems like that you have a great affinity for Irish music as well. And for those of you that are in choir, Karen also writes music that you wouldn't see that kind of is more for the high school and collegiate level. And some of those have a little more of that Irish feel. Talk about that a minute. Where'd that come from?
I think part of where that comes from is part of it is just DNA. Like, I think that's just, that's my heritage. It's in me. So I've always been drawn to that kind of music. I was in Charleston for about 7 years. And while I was there, I was working with someone who had a choir, festival choir, and an organization that was split right down the middle between your normal choral fare and Celtic music. And his wife, so the gentleman, Robert Taylor, is the director of choral activities at the College of Charleston. His wife is a very, very accomplished violinist and fiddle player. And she teaches groups of young kids to play all of these Irish reels, and they're called Na Fiddleri. So I was exposed to a lot of that, and I was hearing a lot of those tunes, fiddle tunes, Irish reels, and then also they brought a group from Nova Scotia that is no longer, I guess, with us, but that Scottish. And the Scottish and the feel of fiddling and all of that kind of stuff. So, I had all that implanted kind of in me just from having the experience with that, and seeing other groups. And I've seen, quite frankly, like Celtic rock groups, and that's what they call themselves. So they're up there with, maybe a djembe or a different kind of drums, the baron, which is the big frame drum that they play. And a penny whistle and a guitar. And it has, Celtic music has this ability to feel not only sort of lilty and folky, the way some of you might hear it, but also really have a little bit of an edge. And that I love all that kind of stuff, the cross rhythms that can come out in it. So, it's a lot of different things playing into that.
Yeah, and I think you do a great job with that. And there's a little bit of that in some of the songs that we've done. I'm trying to think, is it Great Creator that has the violin part at the top? Which one has the folkish?
Light of the World?
Yes, Light of the World. I think it does.
Yeah, and I tend to, when I'm writing I wrote a lot for violin because I also tend to write what is around me. Like, oh, I have a resident violinist. I'm going to write a lot of violin parts. Right now I have a resident flautist, wonderful jazz flautist, but she can play, you know, anything. So that's why you might not know this piece, but Long Expected Dawn is another piece that I wrote for Morning Star that has the flute in it, because that's who I knew could step up and play it for me. But they always have the little, I almost feel like somebody's going to yell at me at some point, but like these little like hammer notes, or the feel of it feels just a little bit more folky, a little bit more Celtic. So it's, you know, it's just something that comes out of me, I guess.
Yeah. So those of you that inquire, that are interested in hearing more of Karen's music, you can easily go to our website, go to the composer bios. When you click on Karen's name, you'll get all of her pieces. So you can hear some of these that we're actually talking about. So it's pretty easy to explore. And then there's more and more that's showing up on YouTube with choirs doing them.
That's always super fun to Google.
Yeah, it is. It is. So one last question that I wasn't on my pre-approved list, but I thought of it as of later, was did you send your piece into Morning Star as just a, I can't remember how that happened. Was it a cold?
So see, what had happened was I was at, you don't remember this, this is cute. When I was at LSU, I was at ACDA Southern somewhere. And I think it was my first one ever. And I was going around just to the different tables of the publishers, and because I was starting to write a little bit more for my choir that I had at the time. And I talked to Mark for so long that he couldn't forget who I was, which is really, you know, and Mark was probably like sensitive about me, but I'm a fairly like non-aggressive person. Some people are really good, and some composers have gotten really far with selling themselves, and they, you know, they just have this thing about them where they think that they're, you know, they belong there and they're super great, and they, you know, and they can sell themselves really well. That is not who I am, like, at all. But for some reason, just in that moment, whether it was, you know, energy or whatever, you know, I talked for, you know, a long time, so that he would remember who I was. And I sent a couple of pieces, and one of them was a setting of I Come With Joy that I've written for my church choir. So that was the first piece, which probably finally came out around 2010 when I was graduating and going, it was probably May of 2010 when I was headed out to Santa Fe. And then there was sort of a lapse there where I was trying to figure out how to write. But yeah, what I was doing exactly. So that's how that happened. Yeah.
Great.
Because we had an ACD and I sent it in.
Good. Was it Chattanooga? I remember.
No, I don't think it was Chattanooga. Chattanooga was when I was a long time into it when I was in Alabama. Like, it could have been Memphis.
Yeah, there was. We did that. Yeah, that could have been it. Well, Kyle, back to you.
I'm being asked, I think I'll ask this right now, some of these questions coming in, since they pertain to your music and on the topic we're on. I'm being asked, what other publishers may you be published under besides Morningstar? Are you published, are you published elsewhere?
That's a sore spot. So most of my publications that are like published for real are with the ECS group. So between, you know, Morningstar and Galaxy, which is another part of that group. I publish some of my own things that are maybe a little bit more of the strange children, as we call them, with Music Spoke, and sort of on my own, selling them on the website. Especially now, I started writing a few COVID safe, sort of calling them, like solo type things or small group kinds of things. But as far as like actual publishing companies, Cola Voce does have a few things. Um, and yeah.
And you should, by the way, you should know that as of today, Cola Voce is being distributed by us. So
Really?
everything's living in the same warehouse, Karen.
So
Just so
you mean I might eventually get paid for those pieces?
Well, no, we don't
we're
pay
not paying.
I
royalties.
was trying not to say, I don't like to say mean things. But that was like, they have my Danny Boy and my Coming Through the Rye, and I have never seen like anything, like even a letter saying, pretty, but no, but you didn't sell it. You know, you should see, if any of you want to compose see what a good company like Morningstar will either send you, a check, or they send you a letter that says, you didn't sell that much, but we're just holding it until next time. Never anything from Coleridge. Okay, all right. That's my rant, my non-Christian rant. I'm over.
I've got another question here that from the same person. How much feedback do you they're asking about the process of the writing, and just the feedback you get from publishers in the process of your writing, and is it hard to accept their feedback?
No, not really. And actually, generally, when I get feedback, it's positive. So a lot of the feedback that I will tend to get from, like I've sent things to Earth Songs, and they said, we really, really like this, but we're overcommitted. I don't know if that's real or not, but anyway, they say nice things. I've had somebody from Santa Barbara not like that, something very specific about the way it split, that it was unison and then it split at a certain point. So they thought, it might not be practical. But like, it's never hard to hear anything like that. I'm like, okay, that's cool. Or, sometimes it really just generally is, this stuff is really well written, but it's just not a fit for our catalog. And, you can try your best to kind of say, hey, I think that my stuff might fit in here. But you don't always, it's not always a marriage, kind of a thing. So all of that stuff I think is very easy to take. I think that what's hard is when you don't hear anything. And that's one of the things that I really, and when people ask me, when they say, I really like to get published, do you have any advice? I say, here are the people that communicate with you. Here are the people that don't, or at least, sometimes if they're really big, they might say, if you don't hear from us in 2 months, it's because we didn't take it. But at least they say that, up front. But some people just won't talk to you at all. But Mark's group is super great about talking to you. And I don't know if it's, not one of their composers, if it's, a little bit different, because I know you can't possibly give the same attention to everyone. But in saying, this is why it's not working for us, so you have some sort of constructive feedback for how to make it either better, if that's what it needs to be, or just a better fit for them. Because sometimes you can have a great piece of music, but it's just not, it's not going to work for their particular audience. We've had some of those, those conversations as well. So, sometimes a piece of music works really well on its own, but it's not particularly a fit for what you're, doing with that, if that makes any sense,
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So,
but I always love feedback that's constructive. I mean, that's never a problem, because it's just good for the music, and for the people that are going to do it.
right,
Yeah.
right.
One thing that's interesting about that is you learn very quickly who you can talk to and who you can't. And you do have composers that don't want any feedback, and others who do. And so we learn quickly who that is, and we appreciate the ones who do like to take and work on it in a more collaborative way. So thank you.
Karen, this has been a challenging time, to say the least, these last 7 months for all of us. And I've asked each composer each month the same question. as singers, it's especially hard for us because the very thing we love is the very thing that we can't do because it might cause harm.
Mhm.
And none of us could imagine 8 months ago that being possible. Do you have any insights to offer to us as choral musicians, perhaps some lessons you've learned or are learning, or questions you're living with, as I sometimes say, maybe not have answers, but questions that you're struggling with or thinking about, and or any lessons or any words of encouragement?
There's a lot of things in that question.
There is.
Is there anything? But the first thing I would say, there's so many things that come to mind. But to be kind to your pastors and to your music leadership and all of that, and because they are working really hard in ways that they never anticipated. They would have to work and just trying to sort of reinvent the wheel and figure out what their job is, this week. So all of that stuff has been very, very sort of, I guess, eye-opening, shocking. I don't know. Whereas you're super busy, you knew how to do your job, and then all of a sudden you don't know how to do your job. So I'm sort of answering this question, and I know most composers, I think, and of choral music do have their choirs that they're directing and all of that kind of stuff. So I have sort of I'm thinking double-hatted here. So we're trying to figure out just all over again how to do what it is that we do, and also what activities are deserving of your energy. I think really right now it could be easy to try to drive yourself crazy, feeling like you have to try all of the things. But that sometimes you just need to try one thing at a time, and sometimes you need to back away and say, I need to rest. Because I'm getting overwhelmed with everything that's coming at with you. So, and some of that stuff is, I guess I'm aiming that directly at Kyle. It's some of the things that I've found, from going through this in the summer and, early fall, but, could apply to any of your lives too, with, trying to figure out how you're doing whatever it is that you're doing. But the other thing I would say is that, this is temporary. This isn't a lifelong thing. I always knew from the beginning, I felt like it was going to be a long-term thing and a longer-term thing than some other folks seemed like they were ready to accept at the time that it started to happen. But it's, so I've been kind of emotionally prepared, but it's not forever. There are some things that may change forever. There are some things that may change for the better forever. Do we really need to pack as many people as humanly possible into as small a room as possible for 2.5 hours? Is that really beneficial to anyone? And what are you learning in that last hour? I'm not really sure. So, maybe we can learn to take better care of our singers. Maybe we can learn to be more efficient. All of those sorts of things. And then also that, people are on this. In May, it was sort of, I don't know how in the know every singer is, but we had a webinar, they call it the webinar that broke the internet, right? And it's just, broke the choral world, where they basically said, they outlined all of the science, which I couldn't conceive that anyone didn't know and understand that that's the way it was, unless they had their head in a box somewhere, and said that, oh, you may not sing together for 2 years. Okay, bye. And we all went, wait, we have questions. So,
Right.
at that time, it seemed like, oh my goodness, no one was acknowledging that there might be ways to make this safer. Well, people are working on it, and there's research coming out of Colorado and all that where they're showing us, yes, there are ways to mitigate the risks, and you have to assess your individual, where you are, how many infections you have, the age of your population, I'm sure, and all that kind of stuff. But so that's how I came up with the idea to stick some of my youngest folks outside in the courtyard with masks, 10, 12 feet apart from each other, 30-minute max, and then we're done. So there are ways that you can engage, that we can engage with each other and have meaningful experiences in the interim as well. So I mean, there's hope all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
So we just have to look for it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that meeting, that webinar that Karen's speaking of, everyone, I was in that. You saw it live, Karen?
Yeah, I saw it live. I was in it.
Okay, I got to be in the live group too.
Yep.
It maxed out, and so other people couldn't get in and had to listen to the recording or text all of us that were in it to ask us what was happening and what was being said. And I just remember going down the hall to our pastor afterwards and saying, "This is more than I ever anticipated to hear in one meeting." I think it just became clear and evident then, that we were in this for the long haul.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, Karen, you've touched on a lot of things. Another thing I just wanted to say in response to that, what you were saying that was kind of specifically driven towards ministers. I had a good friend of ours in the church say to me a few weeks ago, she said, right now we need to extend as much grace as possible to each other, but especially to ourselves.
Yeah.
I needed to hear that at that moment, because I think you're talking to a group of choir members here too who are key volunteers in other areas of the church, so they're ministers too. Every member is a minister in some ways. I have felt like at Kirkwood, because we shoulder ministry together. And I think that's really, so what you were saying, I think kind of spoke to collectively to all of us. So thank you. Mark, I was going to pass it on to you for any thoughts or final questions.
I just want to say, Karen, it's been so great to have you. And one of the things that's fun for me is sitting in choir and having people like Phil Maxwell, who I'm looking at right now, sitting beside me, looking at the composer that's on the page and say, what are they like? Tell me about this person, and then he will say, or maybe David Eaton sitting on the other side will say something about, did they write that text? That's that, so these folks really pay attention to the text. They pay attention to who wrote it. They wonder about it, because in many ways they're an extension of you then to the congregation. It's like you've given them something and now they're going to work on it and they have to buy into it, and then they share it with the congregation. And sometimes they buy in and sometimes they don't buy in.
Yeah.
So, but if they buy in, it's a really meaningful experience for everybody involved. And you do a very, very, very good job of putting pieces into our repertoire that we can sing that are meaningful to the congregation and meaningful to the choir. So thank you that's very much.
And one of my key thrusts as a music director is to kind of create that feeling, because you all are ministers in other areas of the church, but you're ministers in the choir too, right there in worship, and you are enhancing, hopefully, whatever was said in the sermon or is about to be said in the sermon. And so I'm very big on trying to make sure that my folks are hooked into and buying into whatever it is, and that they understand. So it's great that you're focused on the text, because I will always I'll stop them and I'll say, what in the world does this text mean? Because some folks are very mathematical and they don't think necessarily too deeply in that particular way. They think deeply about other things, but don't necessarily think about the deeper meaning of the text. How does it relate to the scripture? How is it going to relate to the sermon? So, those are things that I push with my folks as well. Yeah.
So, well, thank you, Kyle. I think that's all I have.
Thank you, Mark, for helping with the interview tonight. We learned so much, Karen, through through this tonight by having Mark ask questions as well. But we made sure that he didn't throw any surprises. As this group of folks are accustomed to. So thank you again, Karen, and I hope you and yours remain healthy. And as we finish out this year, I hope you have a wonderful year and things that are approaching that are meaningful to us, most meaningful to us during this.
Yeah.
Hope you have a very meaningful season.
And you guys.
And I'm going to close this with a simple benediction, and we'll be dismissed tonight. Friends, the Lord bless you and keep you, and the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up the light of his countenance upon you and give you peace. Amen.
Thanks, Karen.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Karen.
Bye. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for having me.
Yep, thanks for being here. Glad to see you finally got paid by Morningstar.
Don, that's me.
Never a problem.
Don,
Well, it was for me. For
fill
many
all your
years.
orders. Don worked in the warehouse.
Oh.
Yeah, so like I say, I think everything was switched over that I was possibly getting paid came to you, and that's great.
Oh.
But basically, I just worked for free then the last 8-9 years. Good to have you. Thank
Which
you.
is really what he was worth, so it was great.
Thank you.
Bye.
Oh, bye. Good to see you, Karen.
Oh, bye. Thank you.
Oh, and by the way, just so you know, this one little piece of business, we're going to release that